Okay, y'all, today we have Pamela Lamp. And Pamela wrote a book, Do the Next New Thing. And we're going to figure out what the next new thing is. But I brought my girlfriends in, Ruby Powell and Nancy Amos. And we're just going to talk how her book touched us and some of the things and how we handle the situations that you were in. How you doing, Pam?
I'm great. Thank you for having me today.
Tell us a little bit about why you wrote the book.
Well, I had struggled, excuse me, and I apologize for my voice today. I had struggled with what I was going to do after my kids left home. I had been a stay-at-home mom, and I didn't necessarily wanted to report back into an office because I had in-laws and parents out of town that needed some care. I had a husband that traveled a lot, not to really exciting places, but I wanted to be able to go with him from time to time. And then I had kids in faraway cities. So I thought, what can I do at home? What kind of a job could I do? So I struggled with trying to figure out how to do that, what to do. And then at the very same time, we ended up moving from Houston to Nashville. So once I moved, I had no friends. So now I had no purpose, no project, and no community. So I invented a project for myself, a little homework assignment, and that little project kind of led to the book.
And it is even at our age, it is difficult when you move to another city and you leave people behind that that maybe you've known all your life or whatever. And people don't tend to think that as you age that happens. Like they say, oh, it's with the kids, they can make new friends. But it's a little bit hard sometimes, I think, for us because everybody has their own set of what they're gonna do. They do it this way and they've always done it this way. And it's even different if we tell people in East Texas, they did it this way. And somebody said, well, up north, they did it this way, but everybody is different. So Miss Ruby and Nancy, y'all can jump in anytime you get ready to. Um, how was Nashville?
Nashville is snowing right now, and we rarely get snow. So it's beautiful, and people are home because no one can drive in the snow. And it's very, very cold. Very cold. I imagine you're warmer than this in Texas.
Well, we're pretty cold today. It's actually, well, all week and I think most of next week, we're going to be below freezing or close to freezing.
Oh,
It's
wow.
weird. Yeah. This morning I woke up and it was 23 degrees.
Mhm.
It's really cold.
God,
Yeah.
that
One
is
thing
right.
that you had that you said was, and it was, I think I've talked to you about this before, but did you ever write your obituary? Because remember,
That
it's the
was one of
obituary.
my questions too. I've been wondering
Because,
that.
I used to tell my students, okay, President Carter passed, and, by the time he took his last breath, it was up. And I told them, I said, they keep a running thing on famous people. I said, they can take this out and stick this in and so forth. But yeah, did you write your obituary?
I have not written my obituary. I couldn't bring myself to do that. But I feel like I have a little bit more to put into it than I did 10 years ago.
I would say so. Yes, definitely. So would you like to kind of just give us a little highlight of what you may include in that?
Oh, sure, sure. And Marisha asked that question because at the book kind of starts with me taking a walk with a friend when we lived in Houston, and she announced to me that she had written her obituary over the weekend, and I thought, what? Why would you do that? And then it got me to thinking, what would mine say? I don't have a project. I don't have a purpose. Well, I think I've had volunteer activities and that sort of thing through the years. But you know what? Now I've written a book. I've done a podcast. I've, although not great big things, I feel like I've done a little bit. And also, I've realized that you don't have to have a whole laundry list of accomplishments to feel accomplished. I think that's one thing I learned with my New Thing project.
Yeah.
I think all of us could, basically write our obituary, and it may not be as long as something as someone else's. And I like the fact that you said it doesn't have to be anything big, But one of the things that you wrote in your book, it says, what am I going to do basically with the rest of my life? And Nancy had me to think about some things because I never said the word aging. I always said maturing. And then she said, she said, go in and say aging because so many do not have this privilege, of going older. And I went to a party this weekend for New Year's Eve, and I saw some of my classmates, and we decided to get together every 2 years instead of every 5 years because you lose so many. You lose so
Right.
many in
Right.
between. So, how did you figure out what you were going to do with the rest of your life? Or is it figured out, or are you still trying to find your way?
Me?
Mm-hmm.
Is that to me or to
Yes.
me? I started doing new things. Most of them were small. Every day I did something to hopefully integrate myself into the Nashville community and make a friend. I'd drive a new route, go to a different grocery store, make a new recipe, go check out the bookstore or a coffee shop, et cetera, et cetera. I also did a police ride along, which anyone can do. I did some other biggish things to me. Most were small, but along the way, I didn't realize it at the time. It's kind of like watching a child grow or a plant grow. You don't notice it every day. You don't notice it until you look back and see how far that person has grown or that basil plant has grown. But when I looked back, I had gained confidence on this journey. And I wasn't so scared to take a leap. I wasn't worried about doing things right and being perfect at them. I just wasn't so worried. And my husband noticed that too. I was still racking my brain trying to figure out what I was going to do with the rest of my life. And one day he said, and this was probably 8, 9, 10 months into the project, and he said, I know it's still bothering you that you don't know what to do. And I know you're trying to think of a job, a way to earn income, because that's what I felt like I should do to contribute. And he said, just for a second, take income totally out of the question. What would you do if you could do anything you want? And it was funny. The words just came out of my mouth. I said, I'd go around and talk to people and hear their stories and interview them and write it down. And he said, then do it. And of course,
Wow.
I wasn't going to make any money at that. And I thought, I can't write. Who would listen? Who would read? There were all kinds of voices. But he said, just do it. And that's how I found it. I started talking to people and finding out what they did and learning things and interviewing people who did new things to me. And it was so interesting. And then that evolved into a podcast. And it kind of all evolved into the book. So that's how I found what I like to do.
Okay. And Nancy, didn't you have something kind of like that happened where you tried new things?
Yes. I had a really bad car accident right before I turned 60 years old. And, the fact that I lived through it after being in the hospital and so forth was pretty remarkable. And I had a boss at the time when I was about to turn 60, and he said, well, that's been a rough year for you. Why don't you try to do 60 new things in your 60th year? And
Wow.
so I took it and put my own spin on it, and I journaled it as I went along. And some things were very what someone would call inconsequential because I'd used the same perfume for 10 years and I started using a new perfume to see if I liked it. I made banana bread one day. So it's very similar to what you did, Pam. We have wonderful museums in Fort Worth, but at that time I was working full time and extra, and I never availed myself of these world class museums. So, what I did is I assigned myself that I would visit each one of them on my own so I didn't have to shepherd someone with me. And I decided that I would visit each one and find at least one thing that I really loved in that museum. And probably that is the most unusual thing that came out of it because I found a lot of things I liked. I was a little chagrined at myself that I had never really visited them. And now I'm a member of them because I just love the experience and I like to go. That's my um, relaxation place is to go and look at the newest exhibits. So most of the things I did were very personal to me and were kind of selfish. But during that year, when I turned 60, a 35-year-old woman who worked for me died. And she died very suddenly, and she had three young boys that she was leaving behind. And it just was this huge wake up call to quit putting stuff off, to do what you wanted to do now, try new things, even if you failed. And so that's been a long time ago because I'm 75 now and I still try to push myself to do new things. My book was not nearly as organized as yours, but I told Marisha today I read my journal from the first year of COVID when we were in lockdown and what we did to make life fun. And I started out listing all the things that I didn't have anymore in my life, like eating out and going to the movie. But by the time I finished it, it was things I gained from that period of retreating into my own house. So that's been a positive thing for me.
And I
Well,
think all of us have, we have to kind of step out on faith or whatever. And it is, you try to get out. And I had a sorority sister, I think Hazel passed when she was probably about 95. She wore stilettos until she hit 90. And she loved dancing. And she would always tell us, do what you can while you can, because you never know. And she died during COVID. And if it had been just a regular time, she'd have been out dancing somewhere. Ms. Rubin, tell us about some of your experiences.
Well, I think, well, the one that kind of comes home, I'm from East Texas, so, our family was like this and never actually, I was always around family. I was, five kids. I moved to Fort Worth because my oldest sister was here. And that's when I attended and worked at TCU. It was really a nice experience because, coming from East Texas, you started to really meet people that were from other parts of the country more than just centered right there in East Texas. And having done that, I did advance in my career. Uh, and I think the biggest thing for me was when I made the decision to move from family uh, for my job. My job moved to Boca Raton, Florida. My sons were grown at that point. So, I thought, well, the offer came about for me to move. I wasn't sure because I was like, well, even though I had my manager and his family, which was like family, I still just was going to be leaving my family behind. And that was really difficult because it had been kind of like just, ingrained in you and that family first. Family, you're always with family. Family's going to always be there. So luckily, I did step out on faith. I decided, well, I'm going to go. And it broke my father's heart, which I'm a daddy's girl. So that broke my heart that he didn't want me to go. And so I called two, three times a day. And he was like, never talked on the phone. If he was there alone, he was forced to answer the telephone. If he wasn't, he didn't go near it. If you came to him and said, so and so's on the phone for you, he was like, well, ask them what they want. He was not a telephone person. So, but he would come to the phone and that made me feel so good. But I think that had to be the biggest thing is stepping away from my family. But I did enjoy Florida. It was a good experience. I think it exposed me to things that I would not have been and actually prepared me for the next company that I worked for. So that would have to be my biggest.
One thing that that was talked about in the book is a lot of times when we're introduced to other people, we're what our job is. You know, what do
Mm.
you do? And when I first moved to Fort Worth, and I moved and I was here by myself. When I first moved, and you kind of find what you think is a group of friends or whatever, and it would be this kind of quiet when I talked because they all had titles. So, and me being from East Texas, I didn't know that it was a title, and you probably weren't making any more than I was making, but the idea of saying teacher. So, when you moved, Pam, did you find yourself having to tell people what you did?
Well, for years, I would cringe when I was somewhere and people would say, just to make conversation, what do you do? Because I
Mm.
thought, I do nothing, you know. And of course, I did a lot. I stayed home with my kids, but I did nothing income producing. So I'd kind of shrivel in a corner, and I would have loved to have said I was a teacher. When I moved to Nashville, not very many people asked me what I did because first of all, I didn't know very many people, or well, I didn't know anybody. But when I talked to people, it was casual conversation, and we talked more about me moving to Nashville.
Mhm.
Um, that was, I guess, if they said, "What did you do?" That was kind of how I responded. I'm getting used to Nashville, but what I found is, at that point I was 57, and people kind of had their friend groups.
Mhm.
They weren't being mean, but they had their groups of friends that had been college classmates, or they'd known when their kids were growing up, or they'd known when they were working, or they were neighbors. And I think people only have so much social room. So it wasn't that they didn't want to be a friend to me. It's just that they had their friends in place. And that was hard at first. Of course, now I love Nashville and I have friends, and people are certainly wonderful here. But I've talked to 30 and 40-year-olds since the book came out that have felt the same way. That when they moved
Mm.
for a job, they had a hard time making out of work friends.
Mhm. And you think about that when a lot of people, when we went to online working, remote working, and if you didn't have anybody, because I could do the remote thing, but I didn't want to just sit there and talk to people. I wanted to be out with people. I think as we mature, as we age, it is harder because you've been in that group for so long. And it may be hard to let another person in. But I met Miss Ruby through church.
Mhm.
We go to the same church, and I met Nancy through a club that I joined. And one reason why I joined the club was because I didn't want to have just educators as friends. Because we tend to
Mm.
talk about the same thing, over and over. And it's not a bad thing, but like she said, it's so much to do in North Texas. And when you with a group of people that have the same mindset all the time, they want to do the same thing. Anybody else want to jump in?
Well, I think for me, well, like when I moved to Boca, I did have my manager and his wife and two kids. And so the kids and I were kind of close. They were teenagers. And his daughter would call up and say, Miss Ruby, you want to meet me and one of my friends at the movies? Oh, sure. I'll meet. So we would hang out. And then that meant I met that friend's parents, so that helped me a lot, as well. Um, and then once I came out of corporate America and became an esthetician, honestly, after 14 years, I'm somewhat still adjusting because I did have, and some of those people are still in my life, people that I work with that became really close friends. Uh, and I kind of miss that interaction with people, or, meetings with like-minded people, or people trying to make a decision on an issue. So that, for me now, I catch myself sometimes thinking, oh, you should get out more. I'm kind of like in this tunnel. But it's just a little different, like as we mature, I'm trying to meet people outside of where, I work or where my job takes me. Because you can get stuck in that lane, and then it's hard to kind of get out of it.
Or so tired when you got off work. See, retirement opened a new thing for me, but that I had whole days to do things. And I got into nature and photography, which I never had time for when I was working 45 hours a week. And that's brought me a lot of joy and some new connections. Marisha, you will laugh at this. On Saturday, Charlie and I went to a seminar at the River Legacy Center, Nature Center, on bugs. Yes, bugs. And it was
Not bugs.
standing room only, entomology. And the guy who did the course um, is on the autism spectrum. And what a beautiful life he has made for himself and all these friends. And I went because I wanted to support Zach. And he is an expert for one thing, but I was the only one in that whole crowd who raised my hand and said I didn't like bugs. Everybody else was there because they're into bugs, little kids, adults, everybody. And yet, by the time he finished his presentation, I really kind of liked him. I liked what he learned, I respected what he knew, and I was thinking how he had carved a life for himself. And that's what we have to do. I have had 5 friends die in the last 2 years. And so I try to honor their memories by doing things, by living, and I stay in touch with their families and do photos and memories on Facebook because I'm the person who always took all the photos, and others don't have those photographic memories of their loved ones. Well, I do. And
Right.
so I've tried to kind of, never would I have thought that I'd be the person taking pictures. And Marisha always tells me, I want you to do an exhibit. Well, I'm too lazy to do that. But
You
I
have
did do
to.
a
You
book.
have to. Your your
I want,
your photos are wonderful. You have to, Nancy.
can you see this book?
Uh-huh.
I made this. Someone gave me a Shutterfly coupon for $50 for my birthday. And 5 months later, just before it expired, I took some of my favorite photos that I'd taken this
And
year and just put
he
them in a
takes
book with
beautiful
no
photos.
commentary, nothing, but just as a memory. And my grandkids were here and they fell in love with the book because it's mostly nature. So I thought I had my new hobby.
See?
Yeah, that is so nice.
And sometimes when we try to plan things to do, it doesn't come to fruition. Uh, Pam, could you tell us about, I know that you planned when you left Houston and went to Nashville. First of all, the weather. There's two different types of weather. What were some of the things that you planned to do or you had hoped to do, but it just, you had to take a detour?
Can I comment on Lisa's comment first?
Okay.
I wanted to say that Lisa is a great example of,
Are you talking about Nancy?
Nancy.
I'm sorry. Can we edit that out, please? I hope you can. It's Monday morning and it's right after the holiday.
Okay.
So that's
Yeah.
you are a great example of taking the bull by the horns and attacking life. And what I found out is that happiness didn't come to me. I had to go out and be proactive about doing things. And I think that's where it's very easy to get hung up because it's hard to do things. But you're a great example of just stepping in and making things happen. things that didn't work out for me and I had to take a detour. Well, I made a lot of new recipes that didn't work out. And so maybe dinner wasn't so great, or a few of them, I was trying new things, new ingredients, new foods, new procedures, and they just didn't come out at all. Um, oh, sure. I think there were lots of things that I didn't like or didn't go that well. But I think another thing that this journey taught me is, and I've said this before, it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be right. And it helped me, not that I'm great at this all the time, but kind of roll with the punches more than I used to.
Yeah.
Let go a little bit more than I used to.
I think as we age, we tend to, be able to go with the punches a little bit better. And, you plan to do something and it looks good on paper. Or
Yeah.
either somebody told you, oh, it's wonderful. It's like you can put it out there in the universe. What's something good to watch on television? And people will write, and then you look down, and it's 50 people saying that it's the most wonderful movie in the world. And 10 minutes into it, you've already turned it because it's not for you. My youngest one has always been the person that does, and now my oldest one is. But even when she was a little girl, you know how people got new clothes and they had to wait to wear them? She would wear her shoes out of the store because she said, I might not be here tomorrow. You couldn't wait. She never wanted to wait on anything. And so she took me out Saturday, and she said, let's do something besides go to eat. So we went to Dallas to the Parole Museum. She said, we're always going to eat, but let's try something new. And since she is single, she does a lot of things by herself. And I think people in our generation, especially women, we always thought we had to have somebody go with us. But now, I can go out and I can people watch all day long. I sat there, and especially when they had like cafeterias, like I think it was Wise Cafeteria in Hewlin Mall, I could sit there all day long and watch people. It was just interesting to me. Um, how do your friends see you as somebody that's a risk taker now?
I'm not sure they'd call me a risk taker because I've never been a real adventurer.
Mhm.
I'll do things, but I'm not going to skydive or, do a polar plunge or anything like that. But I think they see me as someone that'll organize something new to do. I do plenty alone. I like you said, I had not done a lot of alone things before this project. But they'll say, have you been to any new restaurants, or what should we do? We take field trips. There's a group of us that will take one Friday a month and do a field trip, and I'm usually the organizer of that. We'll go to a museum exhibit or just do something different. And people are always very willing and very appreciative.
And I think it's kind of like Nancy said, it's a lot of things that people tell me they do around here that I've never heard of. And I go,
Yeah.
well, where is that? And so what I did was I start signing up for different subscriptions so that, it would come into my inbox. It's little things that we do. How many of us have china we never use, or crystal that we never use? I told my sister, I said, I have broken every, and I call them cheap wine glass that I have, the kind that come in the thing and they less than $10. And the man said, I went to a tasting one time with the fancy glasses, and he said, you should throw those out. And I was like, no, those are the ones we use. But then my sister said, oh, you can just buy some new ones. I was like, I got all these others. And I never use them. Who's going to use them? And
Use them. You have to use them.
you do.
You absolutely do.
Yeah.
I don't have anything in my kitchen that I don't use.
When I had,
Wow.
my mother told me, don't have anything out that you can't afford to have broken. She said, it's going to happen.
Mhm.
And it did.
Now,
It did.
I am selective with who I let use certain things. It's
Yeah,
like maybe my youngest granddaughter. No, baby.
you can't use that. Not yet. You have to wait
Yeah,
till you're a little bit older.
a little bit older, but uh, I think you do. You have to just use things so that you truly appreciate them. Because clothes in a cabinet, it's not going to help. I just because I think back when we were kids, why we have to just eat off these dishes at Christmas, Thanksgiving, Christmas? Can't we eat off
And take
these?
out the silverware and polish it once a year.
Oh, and now that I don't like. I have mine and my mother-in-law's silver, and the, all of it needs to be polished right now. So we just used regular
Regular.
uh, silverware or flatware at Thanksgiving and Christmas. But I remember only using those dishes and glasses on those holidays, and maybe on Easter as well. And I just remember thinking, I'm going to use mine, and I do. I don't use them every day. Sometimes I will. If I come in and I decide I'm going to cook a decent dinner because I'm not a big cooker anymore, I will pull out that plate and one of those goblets or drinking glasses and use it. Yeah.
But see, my thing is now we don't use plastic in our home. There's no plastic, there's no paper. We have too many dishes. So, and
Mhm.
when we had, when the kids came over for Christmas, my oldest one usually brings out paper, but she didn't even bring it this time because I tell her, we have too many dishes. Why are we using paper? Let's just go
Mhm.
on. They don't
Yeah.
like it because you have to, to wash the dishes by hand. One thing that I was thinking about is and I heard you say, Pam, when you try new things, when I take my husband to some of his appointments and I know they're going to take like an hour, I try to find a new coffee shop. And I order the exact same thing every time, black coffee with room for cream. And I told somebody, they said, which one was the best one? I said, depending on who you are. They all had a different sense of something. One seemed like it was really a young person's place. And I remember going in there the first time. And I went with a coworker and we sat there and we finally asked the barista, are we too old to be in here? Because it was just like everybody came in was 19. He said, no. He said, different times of the day means a
Mhm.
different crowd. I even found one that during the day, it's a coffee shop, and you turn around the corner, it's a bar. I didn't ask them if they were both open at the same time. Um, Pam, what would you say to somebody that maybe they did have to move away and go somewhere different, leave what they know behind and start all over again? What would you tell them?
Well, I think, this project worked for me. I thought it was a pretty good way to acquaint myself with a new area and learn a whole lot of other things in the meantime. And in the book are some resources that many of them I didn't even know they existed while I was doing this project. It was, a year ago, I found out about this wonderful newcomers club in Nashville. And I
Mhm.
don't know how I missed that. And a couple of universities have lifelong learning programs, which are full of interesting classes, interesting programs, and interesting people
Yes.
that were roughly my age. And I didn't know about them until lately. I would say, make a list of everything possible that you can do. Keep a running list. Don't discount anything. And Google incessantly, newcomers clubs, women's groups, alumni groups for your high school or college, neighborhood groups. There are just a lot of groups out there that are full of people that are in the same situation. And I've learned that, I learned that after the fact because I had some people reach out to me. Bookstores have book clubs. There are a lot of things to take advantage of that we might not think of because in our old living space we were so comfortable.
Yeah. And we are. And I see more people our age kind of stepping out. It may not be what I want to do or you want to do, but they are stepping out. And it's okay not to take every friend with you because
Right.
my best girlfriend and I have known each other since second grade. She keeps saying, she says it's sooner than that, but I remember it's second grade. But, and she lives in Arlington, so it's not that far, except it is now because we have all the construction. But she likes some things that I don't like. And she was a very good educator and she got a lot of awards and things. But one time I told her, I said, I am not going to eat another piece of chicken to see you get another piece of paper. I'm just so, let's do something different. And we have, her health has been a little bit bad, but we continue to try to do something a little bit different. I had a girlfriend and we went to Marshall, where she's from in East Texas. On the way back, we decided to come Highway 80. Now it took us all day because we
Yes,
stopped
it does.
everywhere in Highway 8. We stopped in Gladewater and looked at the junk, and they call antiques. We ate at places, but it was fun because we don't go Highway 80 anymore. We go 20.
Sure.
It's little things like that. So what's the last thing that you can think of? This is for everybody that you kind of just said, I'm gonna try this. And maybe it worked out and maybe it didn't, because I always go back to your chapter, nudist for a day. It would be like nudist in my mind. I would never say for a day, for a second, for anything. But what was the last thing or something recent that you said, I'm gonna try, and maybe it worked out, maybe it didn't. This is for everybody.
Hmm.
I'd say the bug show this weekend. It
That would
surprised
be
me so much. And also he had done all the photographs himself, and they were like professional grade photographs. And that inspired me that if I work on my photography a little bit
Mhm.
better, I'll get better. But while we were talking, I just thought of some adventures that I want to do. I've never done the blown glass thing. Have any of you done that? And there's a place on
Mhm.
Magnolia that does that. And I just thought, oh, I'd be terrible at it.
That's
And
where I
I think
went.
I'm going to try that.
That's where I went. And my thing was, you buy the Groupon and you go. And that's how I did that when I bought the Groupon. And then a lady that I worked with had her birthday party there. We didn't blow glass, but when we were
Oh,
there, but we made trays, and they had to put them in the thing, and it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. Will I do it again? Probably not. But I thought it was a fun thing to do, and it's interesting when they tell you about certain things. And, so it's
yeah.
everybody is so different. When I was working, I went to you said according to your department. So I was business education. So everybody that I kind of hung around with was business ed. And we went to a workshop with the English people, and they were all over there. And you had to write something. So I'm just writing, and my friend is writing, and then we're through. And so she looked over there, she said, they still writing, write something else. We wrote a little something else, and then we stopped. She said, they are still writing. And they flipped that paper over and they were still writing. And I think it's the way we had been taught back then in business, the shorter to the point. They didn't have time to read
Yes.
flowery stuff. And in English, they were writing books or whatever. So, it's those kind of things. What about you, Miss Ruby?
I'm trying to think. Move on. I gotta think of something.
Okay, Pam, you want to tell us about being a nudist for a day?
A while ago. That was a few years ago. I'm trying to think of recently what I've done.
One thing is you learn to say no and make
Today,
it a complete sentence.
Yeah.
okay. Today I did, it was snowing and cold, so I stayed home and I wanted to work out. So I did a video
Mhm.
online that I've never done before. And after we chat today, I'm going to make cookies just so the house is cozy and warm. And it's a recipe I've never tried. These aren't very big.
Mhm.
No, but they make things interesting.
Yeah.
You know, I just want to insert this. When I moved to Nashville, I had a therapist because my parents were aging and having some difficulties. My dear in-laws were having some problems. We were new, and I thought I need to have someone that I can talk things over with. And as I visited her on numerous occasions, we talked about these new things, and she said there is so much power in new things.
Mhm.
And she said that's what therapists and psychologists recommend to clients is to do anything new because it just resets resets your brain and makes you feel happy and more optimistic and more motivated. So she was a big help to me with the book and in helping me with research and so forth. But she said the little things count as much as the big things.
I think so. Because I think we're more apt to do little things than big things. It's like I love to travel, but next week I'm not going to Italy or anything, but I may go to Granbury. You'll find something new in Granbury that I've not seen. Um, or ride the train to Grapevine, and look at the lights or whatever. It's not something that's big or something that somebody's going to, say, oh my God, I wish I did that. They might say, well, I'm thinking about it, but I've never ridden it, so maybe I'll go. Miss Ruby?
Well, one thing I've been thinking about, and this has been for probably a couple of years now, I have great grandkids.
Mhm,
I have never had them all in the house at the same time with just me.
mhm.
And I did that on purpose. I was just like, I'm just not ready for that, not to be the only adult. So I think that, but I had planned to do this uh, like last year, but I'm going to make it happen and probably maybe in the spring. But yeah, I think it'll be fun. You know, the majority of them are girls, and there's
Mhm,
only two boys, so that should be interesting. And those girls are definitely like their mamas.
mhm.
They are sometimes a challenge. Bossy can just almost like set you off without you even realizing that at any minute you may just blow up. But that's the one thing I've been planning, but kind of as it gets closer, I kind of push it away.
Mhm.
But I, I think I need to do that. I think I need it for me and just, so that they have some memories
Mhm.
as well, because we spent time with the grandparents, great grandparents,
Mhm.
aunts, uncles, and I think it's just really important. So
Sometimes it's
that's
out of necessity that we have to do things. And that reminded me, Pam, when you were talking about your in-laws and your parents, I had to go through those steps with people. And I always think about my grandmother on my dad's side. When she had to go into a facility, it was like you had to look for one. And what we decided on was one that was close to her church because we theorized that when they left church, they might stop by to see her. And they did because all of her friends were basically her age, but that was the
Mm.
one place that they still went. Somebody might have to pick them up, but they would stop by and see her. But I think as we age, it's okay to fail. When we were younger, it was not okay to fail. Um, Now it's just like, well, I tried it. It didn't work out. Like you said about the recipes. My sister tried to give me, she has two KitchenAids. One's big, one's little. She said, you can have the little one. I was like, why? It's gonna go in my cabinet and make up more stuff on top of the cabinet. I don't bake. So I have tried. and I have moved on. I said, so those things I don't need, but and back to the coffee shops. There's one that has a cold brew coffee shop. I'm thinking they're going to have you drinking iced coffee, which I think that's an oxymoron. Coffee and cold don't go together to me. But they brew it cold. And then they can warm it up for you, which is kind of strange, but I liked it. So ask me what I did next. Went out and bought a cold brew coffee machine. It
How
is
often
now,
have you used it?
it is now under the cabinet. It moved from the top to the cabinet. So, it's those kind of things that we can try to, but it was fun. It was fun. I'm into fun now. That's the way I am about movies. I want fun movies. I was watching a Hallmark movie during Christmas, and my husband said, Is she gonna marry him?" I said, "It's Hallmark. Yes, she's going to marry him. And the bad lady now is the good lady." I said, "So it's Hallmark." He said, "Why do you watch those?" Because that's what makes me feel good. Um,
And I can watch those year round. I can. I can watch those.
Too.
You too?
They are
Oh, wow,
happy.
great.
I like Happy.
Yeah,
I like
great.
Happy. I don't like Five People Dead the first 5 minutes, and I had to see it. I like old cowboy shows that when they shot you, you died. That was it. You just died, and you died with your hat on, and that was it. Okay, Pam, you said embrace uncertainty and discover purpose, happiness, and friendship. Give us words of wisdom before we leave.
I think, as I mentioned before, you have to make an effort. But I think if you try new things, what it did for me is it kind of created a happiness loop.
Mhm.
I felt better about myself, no matter if I did them consistently. I felt better about myself. I was happier. I felt more interesting. I'm not sure I was, but I felt more interesting. And I think that's all that matters. I think my relationships improved. And because my relationships improved, I was more content. So I think it was just
Nope.
a big loop. And I proved to myself too, or I learned that, and you know this, but you kind of have to figure it out for yourself. When we moved to Nashville and I didn't have any friends and I wasn't very happy, I was less than enthusiastic about being here. No one's going to knock on your door. You have to go out and work for it. And I thought, my happiness, it's not my husband's responsibility to try and make me happy. I have to make my own happiness. So I encourage people to give it a try and see what happens. Even if you give it a try for a month. I said I was going to do it for a year. And at the end of the year, I stopped. And what I noticed very quickly was I'm falling back into my old routines. I'm drowning in sameness again. I'm going to the same places, making the same meals and doing the same thing. And Laurel, the therapist, we were talking about that. And she said that research has shown that you have to make things like that a habit or they don't stick. Humans are hardwired to kind of just go back to the old safe way that they've always done things. So that may be too many words of wisdom, but
But that's
No,
good because we do fall back into the same old habits that we've always had. Miss Ruby, Nancy, do you have any parting words?
No, I'm going to go do something new.
I probably wouldn't have gone to the bug thing, but I still would have had my hand up. I don't like bugs, but it's amazing to me. It's like my youngest one told me. She said, "You can tell teachers that love teaching." She said, "No matter how dull we think their subject matter is," she said, "they have their hands going and they're doing all of this." She said, "Geography is not fun for anybody." She said, "But our geography teacher is doing all these things and telling us this." She said, "We rarely ever have a worksheet that she wants us to be hands-on and do this." She said, "So no matter what they teach, if they love it, you can tell." And I think that's true about life. And one thing that I always do when I do travel is I find the Black History Museum. And it could be in a house about as big as my bathroom. And
Mhm.
it's not, and you get there and you find somebody there that's volunteering because most of them don't have budgets. And you talk to them and you can stay for half a day because they're telling you all these different things. So, you think about all that. Miss Ruby, you have something to say?
Well, I'm going to try my best to try new things.
Mhm.
Um, being a widow has been a challenge, and I found myself kind of locked in this space. So that's the one thing, is just try and uh, just venture out more, because you can kind of get in that box, but I'm done.
I learned some things from Miss Ruby. And one thing is I call her Miss Ruby because that's what we do in East Texas. But I learned some things from her because she had been a caregiver and I had to be a caregiver. And it's been, your life just changes. It is not the same. It's not anything that you're going to do the same way every time. Something it looks like it throws a ringer in there. But even my kids said, you got to stop and take care of yourself. So
Mhm.
they said, do something fun. My mother used to always tell me this when I first moved to Fort Worth. I paid my little apartment rent and my car note, and I bought groceries. And then I took my checkbook and found I don't have very much money left. So I called my mom and she said, well, did you pay your rent? I said, yes. She said, you pay your car note? I said, mm-hmm. She said, do you have food? I said, yes. She said, you're good. And then she told me, she said, but every time you get paid, buy something for yourself. She said, back then, she said, if it's a magazine, a tube of lipstick, some lotion, she said, this is yours. And I stuck to that. And sometimes it might cost $1, $2, and most of the time it's nothing really big, but that was her thing. And I think that was one of the things to try to get me out of my funk. Because if you don't have any money, you go sit down. But then I learned Fort Worth, you could travel. That first year I went to the chili cook-off. I remember that it was over there at the park by the zoo. And these two guys said, would you like some of our chili? I really didn't want any chili, but I said yes. And when I looked down in that big pot, there was this possum smiling at me. I just And they didn't make chili. They just had this possum in there looking at you. And they have this permanent grin on their face. But I had a wonderful time walking around. Pamela, tell everybody where they can find you.
I have a website called whoimettoday.com,
Okay.
and I'm on Instagram at Pamela Lamp 2 and Facebook at Pamela Lamp.
Okay. And Miss Ruby, tell everybody where they can find you.
Okay, I'm on Instagram as AP Skincare uh, Studio. I'm also on Facebook as Ageless Perfection Skincare Studio.
And Nancy, tell everybody where they can see your beautiful pictures.
Nancy Amos on Facebook, and I sometimes put them on Instagram at Namus TX, NAMOSTX is my handle there.
Okay. I appreciate everybody. And we're going to continue talking after we start recording. And remember, this is your best year.